guys, today I'm going to show you how to start sweet potato slips two different ways. One way is the water method, and then the other way is the soil method. So we're going to talk about that today. First of all, excuse the messy work area over here, but the water method is probably the most widely used method for slipping sweet potatoes. It's pretty easy. You just take a couple toothpicks and poke them into the side and about the middle of the potato or so, and then you stick it in some water, and then you'll see all these roots starting to grow down below. And then once it develops good root growth down here in the jar, then you'll start seeing little buds. First, it'll look like these little tiny buds right here, or maybe this one down here. Then you'll start to see some little tiny baby leaves growing, and then eventually it'll look like this. And then these will get taller and taller. These are the slips. So each of these, this is a slip. This is a slip over here. This is a slip growing down here. Now you can cut these slips to make more slips, and I'll show you how to do that later on in the video. But this is the water method. If you're doing the water method, make sure about once or twice a week you're changing the water, so you just dump it out and refill it. That keeps this potato going pretty healthy. You might see a few spots starting to develop around the water line. In my experience, that's not a big deal. That's not ideal. It's not great for the growth, but in my experience, it's really not a big deal. I actually thought this one was going to die and rot away, and I was going to have to start it over again, because when I first put it in the water, it started to get a little bit of like yucky stuff right there, right at the water line. But that's stopped, and it's actually going away. Now, as you can see, I'm getting little baby leaves and a lot of healthy growth on this one, so I think this one's going to be okay. Here's another method for growing sweet potatoes. This is the soil method. So first I buy some regular potting mix. This has some bigger pieces in it if you look inside. Not sure if you're going to be able to see this or not, but there's all different sizes of chunks in there. You want finer stuff for the sweet potatoes, and also I do this for seed starting too. To get the finer soil out of this potting soil, what you want to do is you want to sift it through. We use a 1/4 inch hardware cloth just over a couple sawhorses. We'll stick a tub down here when we're trying to sift the soil, and it just rests right here over the sawhorses. We sift it through here. The bigger pieces stay on top, the finer soil falls through the bottom, and then we put the bigger pieces in this bucket. And this is, it's wet right now because it rained on it, but it's basically mulch. This is the bigger wood pieces that you'll see in potting soil sometimes. So for this, you're going to need some kind of shallow container. You want it to be longer than the potato. That's really, in my experience, the only qualification it has to have. It has to be longer than the potato. So you're going to take your soil that you sifted. You're going to put it in your container. Now, I have a 4-year-old, so my container is a recycled juice container. Just a big jug of juice. We cut it in half and we use that, and it works just fine. You're going to take your sifted soil. You're going to put it in your shallow container, and then you're going to put your potato about halfway into the soil. Once your potato is in the soil, before you see any slips poking up at all, any buds, any of that stuff, the first thing that happens is you'll start to see these roots develop out of the bottom of the potato. You should see them. If you're using a clear container, you should see the roots on the bottom. If you were using the water method, you'll see the roots first coming out of the potato down here in the bottom of the jar. But if you're using the soil method, you should see them on the bottom of the soil, just like that. That just means it's healthy. That means it's doing what it's supposed to do. So if you're getting nervous, it's been a while, because sweet potato slipping can take up some time sometimes. If you're getting nervous, all you have to do is pick it up and look on the bottom. And if you start to see some of those roots, that means it's doing its job. And eventually you'll get little baby slips right here. Then you'll start to see little slips coming out of the side of your potato. See if I can show you where it's kind of connecting right there on the side. Those are going to grow until you want them to get about 5 or 6 inches. Again, not an exact science, but you want it to get about 5 or 6 inches before you do anything else. You can let your slips get longer before you pull them off of there and do something else with them. That's not a big deal. If they get big and bushy, if you forget about them or you get busy. And from there, we're going to go back inside so I can show you what to do. Now, this is the scary part. When they're ready to be pulled off, what I do is I will come down here to the base of the slip, gently work my fingers down here, and try to separate it from the potato very carefully. I'll put the camera down so I can use both hands. Once you get the slip separated, I personally like to pull off like the bottom couple of leaves because you're going to stick it in some water. And I don't like those leaves like deteriorating inside the water because it tends to make the water cloudy faster and it's just not as healthy as it could be. So I'm going to pinch those off of there really quick. Poof, done. Okay, then you just stick it in some water. And it should root out. Now these, I did a while ago. These have developed their own roots, and see the roots all the way down there inside these jars. Those are from couple slips I picked off before. Belle helped me with those. My daughter helped me with those. Another way to separate the slips from the potato is to find these little nodes right here and use a pair of really sharp snips and cut it just below those nodes. Okay, and it's a little bit easier. Now, something else that's really cool about sweet potato slips is, do you see those little white dots at the base of where the leaves shoot off? Those are little nodes, and those will actually become roots if you allow them to. So what I actually did with these is I found some of the little nodes. I didn't do it all the way down the stem, but some of the little nodes, and we snipped it off with the sharp snips right below the node, right there, at about a 45-degree angle. And then it made a whole bunch of little slips that we put in water, and they rooted out, and that's what these were. All of the slips in these 3 jars came from 2 slips that were about this long that I pulled off of a sweet potato a few weeks ago. Now, whether you use the water method or the soil method, you're going to want to make sure that your sweet potato slips are getting some light. I set mine over here by a couple of my AeroGardens because the light from the garden usually helps them grow a little bit better. But I've also seen people put them on a windowsill, grow them in a sunny window, grow them on their kitchen counter, and it usually works just fine. When you're ready to plant your slips outside in your garden to start actually growing your sweet potatoes, you're going to want to just make sure that all of the roots are buried underneath the soil and the leaves are on top of the soil, and keep them really heavily watered because they're going to be used to a moist environment. One more thing that I've seen people do sometimes with the soil method here is I've seen people keep this whole setup inside a tub with a lid to keep the environment really humid, and then that way you don't have to water it as much. It's a little more hands-off. I don't do that just because we don't have a really good space to just keep a bunch of tubs everywhere, but this sits up here really nice, and it kind of fits into our little growing corner here pretty easily. So we don't do that, but you can. If you want to be a little more hands-off with it, you won't have to water it as often. Once you get your slips in the ground, you just keep them heavily watered, say good prayer for a good harvest. Hopefully at the end of the season, you'll have lots and lots of delicious sweet potatoes to feed.